Hello and welcome to the Morning Sports Breakfast. Morning Sports Breakfast? No, the Morning Sports Briefing. I'm just hungry, just thinking about breakfast. That's what it is. Here on Tuesday, the 9th of June, here on New Zealand Sports Radio. That's right, we come to you at 7 a.m. every single morning. Your best way to start the day up to date with the important sports news. And today in the news, A-League must pay players. New Zealand Cricket welcome chance to host games. Bulldogs slay Dragons. Premiership cuts salary, and Southland announce new coaching team. So let's get straight into it with that football news. And before we get on to the A-League, over in Germany, there has been a really weird twist of fate. Saarbrücken have had an amazing run to the German Cup semi-finals. This is because they're the first team outside of the top three to ever reach this stage, and they get to host Bayer Leverkusen on Tuesday. This will be their first game in 94 days. The Bundesliga resumed on the 16th of May. However, the Regionale Südwest got cancelled and hasn't resumed. So Saarbrücken are going to have to play this game, having had no warm-up games whatsoever, their biggest game in their history. So good luck to Saarbrücken. But yes, it's going to be a massive challenge for them. Over in the A-League, and the players have said that clubs have 6 weeks to pay all outstanding wages to players basically before the competition can resume. This is part of the agreement that the players have made around a cut in salaries. The highest earners will sacrifice 80% of their salaries between June and August. This is to allow the lower earners to take a smaller cut. The majority of the clubs are said to have committed to the agreement, but apparently 2 are still outstanding. That could cause an issue if the A-League wants to restart on July the 17th. To me, let's be honest, getting paid seems like a fair thing. So you got to say that you understand where the players are coming from. Also, the A-League contracts run out at the end of May, on the 31st of May, as we've mentioned before, and players whose contracts run out will have the option of either taking part in the remainder of the season, or they're allowed to become free agents and basically move on to their next jobs, because some players will already have signed for other teams. Sydney FC have been lucky that their players, their visa players or overseas players, have stayed in Australia, but apparently at least 20 foreign players and coaches are still overseas at the moment and haven't returned. So some of the teams may not look the same as you were expecting to see them when play does resume. And that's you up to date with the football news. I'm going to hand you over now to Ashwin, who's going to take us through our cricket update.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to all our viewers and listeners out there. So today, New Zealand Cricket welcomed the chance to host neutral games. With the country declared COVID-free, Heath Mill, CEO of New Zealand Cricket Players Association, believes that, as per the approach to England in April, New Zealand could provide neutral venues for countries grappling with the pandemic still. Since then, the ECB has gone on with their summer program, and they made it local, basically. So the test matches they will be playing against the West Indies, Pakistan, and the one-day series and T20 against Australia will be locally played. However, there is still the possibility of the domestic programs being moved, and that's where COVID-free areas like New Zealand still have the chance to host a few games. ICC are looking at extending the substitutions to COVID-affected players. They already have substitution rules in place for concussion-affected players, and now they're looking at allowing substitutions for anyone that develops COVID-type symptoms during a game. The player would be placed in isolation. And up for further discussion is whether the players that are surrounding him, for example, standing in the slips, would also be subbed. To me, it would be basically a case of you're subbing the COVID-affected player only, otherwise you're basically subbing the whole team. Because every time there's a wicket, everybody comes together and high fives, etc. So effectively, if they were going to implement this substitution rule, it's only for the COVID affected player. As I say, it would be the whole team otherwise. And just a reminder to join Rohit Taran and this week Tosif Sati, or more commonly known as Taz, on Swinging from the Hip. This week we'll be having a leg spin masterclass. So tune in to pick up tips on how to get some extra revolutions on the ball. That's right here on New Zealand Sport Radio, Thursday at 8 p.m. New Zealand time for your cricketing fix with Swinging from the Hip. And that's our cricket news for today, Paul.
Thank you very much, Oswin, for that cricket news. I'm going to hand you over now to Stephen, who's going to take us through our birthday updates.
Good morning, Paul, and good morning to everybody tuning in this morning to New Zealand Sports Radio and birthdays today. A busy striker who played for the All Whites, a Rugby World Cup winning utility back, and finally a powerful winger who specialises in both 7s and 15s. Ben Lamb, born this day, the 9th of June 1991, is a New Zealand professional rugby union player. He won a Glasgow Commonwealth Games silver medal in 2014 in the Rugby 7s. Lamb played a wing for Mitre 10 Cup team Auckland before he was selected for Auckland and the Blues sides in 2012. He played 12 games for Auckland after making his debut in 2012 against Hawke's Bay. He made one Super Rugby appearance for Auckland Blues in 2012. In November 2012, he entered into a contract as New Zealand's 7s player, making his debut at the Dubai 7s. Lamb, who turns 29 today, won a silver Commonwealth Games medal as a member of the All Black 7s team at the Glasgow Commonwealth Games 7s in 2014. Staying with the oval ball game, Richard Kahui, born this day, the 9th of June 1985, is a New Zealand rugby union player. He plays for Toshiba Braves Lupus in the top league in Japan. He previously played for the Highlanders and the Chiefs in Super Rugby, Waikato in the National Provincial Championship and New Zealand International. He plays at centre and wing. Kahui, who turns 35 today, made his debut for the All Blacks in 2008 and went on to make 18 appearances until 2011, culminating being part of the All Black squad that went on to win the Rugby World Cup that particular year. And finally, we turn to the round ball game. Noah Hickey, born this day, the 9th of June 1978, is a New Zealand footballer who plays for Gisborne City in the Central Premier League and last played professionally for New Zealand Knights in the Hyundai A-League. He plays either as a striker or a right wing and was an established member of the New Zealand national team, the All Whites. Hickey, who celebrates his 42nd birthday today, played 33 games for the All Whites between 1997 and 2007. And that almost wraps up birthdays. But just on Noah Hickey, if you YouTube him, he used to play for Central United. That was an Auckland football team, and you'll see an amazing. Oh, I don't know how to say it. It's a comedy where he should score a goal right in front of goal, but he managed to get himself in such a. He pirouetted and did a 360, turned around and completely missed the opportunity. Virtually, it's really something out of bloopers or just needed Benny Hill music. So go ahead and Google it on YouTube. Noah Hickey blows a goal in front of goal. That's our birthdays. I'll be back shortly with some leg news, something more serious.
Dear. Poor fellow getting reminded about that on his birthday of all days. Jeez, Stephen. Anyway, moving on to rugby news. But before I do that, don't forget, you can listen to the morning sports briefing on your commute to work. Just download the New Zealand Sports Radio podcast. Search for that on iHeartRadio, iTunes, Spotify, Acast, or your favourite podcatcher. We are all over the place. So do download the podcast and have a listen, folks. That is one of the ways you can support the channel. In rugby news, Premiership have agreed to reduce the salary cap by 1.4 million. Interesting that it says it's unanimous when we've had Bristol's owner come out and say that he disagreed with it, but in the end they have done that. The senior ceiling will come down to 5 million plus the 600,000 of academy credits to help clubs will also get removed. This reduction will be in place until the end of the 2023-24 season, which is expected to get announced today. It's then hoped that the cap can then resume to 6.4 million plus the £600,000 worth of academy credits. The club's changes also been agreed to the marquee player dispensation, that 2 players will not count towards salary cap, but that will be reduced to just 1 player from now, from the 2022-2023 season. So yes, that's clearly reducing it straight away will be difficult with contracts that are in play with players. But yes, from 2020 to 2023, they decided to reduce the number of marquee players. And let's be honest, that is where a lot of the big spend and some of the issues have been created. As we mentioned on the Driving More show last night, they're expecting big crowds for the return of Super Rugby this weekend, with Super Rugby Otara taking place. The Highlanders have come out and said that they're expecting that being world first, they're expecting to have a big crowd and also a big TV audience for their game against the Chiefs on Saturday evening at 7:05 at kickoff. So really looking forward to that one, folks. So if you want to get along, do get your tickets. You know, it might even be a sellout. I think they're talking about those sort of numbers, but they are talking about a big crowd. Also down in the bottom of the South Island, and Dale McLeod has announced his coaching team for the Stags at the upcoming Mitre 10 Cup season. He is going to be joined by a Stags Centurion, David Hall, and also Jason Kawu as his 2 assistant coaches. Dale was very clear that he wants to hire his assistant coaches from within Southland, not only creating a pathway for players, but also creating a pathway for coaches as well. So he's excited to have these 2 guys on board. Jason Kawu has been part of the coaching setup for the past 4 seasons, and David Hall was has been the academy manager for the past since 2017. So both of these assistant guys, managers, know the squad well already, and it'll be they'll get up to speed quickly. That's brought you up to date with our rugby news, and I'm going to hand you over to Stephen for our league news, the sport that keeps on giving, both on and off the pitch.
It certainly does. But just before I do, Paul, get up there, you Stags. Great to see Dale McLeod has got his team in place, and we want to just wish them all the very, very best. Well, somebody who's not at their best at the moment, St. George Illawarra Dragons coach Paul McGregor is becoming under ever-increasing pressure to keep his job after his charges were well beaten 22-2 the Canterbury Bulldogs by the Canterbury Bulldogs at Bankwest Stadium, a result that leaves the Dragons at the very bottom of the NRL table with just 2 wins from their past 14 games. Dragons supporters must be wondering what is happening as they lumber through their worst season start since 2005. A team stacked with representative talent, the Dragons could not form a winning combination despite several changes to the spine, which McGregor had hoped would spark improvement. However, it's been 2 consecutive weeks without a try for the Dragons, last scoring against the Panthers in round 2 back in March. Corey Norman's move to fullback did not have the desired result, while it was a tough debut at halfback for Adam Clune, who made the team's only line break. It sets McGregor up for another week of speculation over his future at the club after 6 seasons in charge. And while the disappointment intensified for the Dragons, the Bulldogs rallied for Kieran Foran's 200th NRL game. Foran made his return from a shoulder injury, which had threatened to end his season. Although he was physically spent at times during the game, Foran helped to steer the Bulldogs out of a sloppy opening 10 minutes to a near perfect completion rate. A try to Adam Elliott through the middle put the Bulldogs on the board in the first half, while Nick Meaney and Remus Smith polished off the win with a second half of 4-pointers. The Dragons will play Cronulla on Sunday at Campbelltown, while the Bulldogs will face high-flying Sydney Roosters at Bankwest Stadium. That final score again, Canterbury 22, St George Illawarra 2. And finally, in Liga news this morning, well, a few trials and tribulations for Shaun Johnson. He's been described as an $800,000 headache by league legends led by Cooper Cronk, ripping into his recent performances. The Kiwi halfback who joined Cronulla Sharks 2 years ago after being chased out of the Warriors has been described as firing blanks by Cronk. The recently retired Cronk is a legendary NRL figure, having been at the heart of the Melbourne Storm dynasty before guiding the Sydney Roosters to titles. Despite the Sharks' victory over North Queensland, in which Johnson had 2 try assists, Cronk and Cronulla icon Paul Gallen took aim at the Kiwi. Johnson's the key, Cronk told Fox Sports. Johnson won the Golden Boot in 2014, signed with the Sharks on a 3-year deal. This is his second, and to be honest, he's fired blanks since arriving. That sums it up for me, is he puts in his kick where he makes the ball top basically for the first try. You sit there on the reverse angle and it bends away from the fullbacks, obviously just describing some of his skill or what he's not showing at the minute. But then when the game's in the balance, he goes for a kick for touch from halfway and shanks it. I did see that. It was a shocker. And 5 minutes later, he was another kick in the game with the balance, and he kicks it dead for a 7-tackle set. He can be the best player in the world, but he just doesn't deliver enough for me. And if the Sharks are going to do something this year, you've got enough talent on that list led by Wade Graham. Cronk said Johnson needs to be the star, despite the ability of fellow playmakers Chad Townsend and Matt Moyland. When you get to the back end of your career, you lose your physicality. For Shaun to be a threat with ball or over the top, you need to run. Otherwise, people don't think you're a threat, Cronk said. And I suppose, in summary, Shaun Johnson is one of those players. The more you can get the ball in his hands, the better he is. And when he does decide to run, that's when he truly is a threat. But I just suspect, Paul, he had a broken leg a few seasons back, and I just wonder if it's all about finding that confidence. I'm sure the guys on Wednesday night, both Brad and Sanjay, will have an opinion. So tune in Wednesday night for our league show, and I think they'll decipher exactly where Shaun Johnson's career is going at this point in time. Well, that's it for league. I will see you again tomorrow morning. Thank you, Paul.
Thank you very much, Stephen. And moving on to other sports news, and the NZNBL have announced or have published the list of all the players who are in the draft. You do not have to scroll down very far to find one of the legends or dreamers that's in there. That's right, Paul Baines is on that list. I will be in the draft for on Thursday. I'll let you guess as to whether I'm a legend or a dreamer there. Pre-selection of players is happening and it has to be submitted today. And on Wednesday, they will be announcing the order of the draft. We'll be having the Limited Minutes podcast. Will be here on New Zealand Sports Radio, brought to you by Hugh Benyon, and he will be doing a show, he will be previewing the draft. So look out for that podcast. That will be coming out before Thursday, which I say when the actual draft is taking place. It goes from 5 p.m. on Sky Sports 3. So check that out on Thursday. Also, one of the issues that a lot of teams are having, a lot of clubs are having, is around volunteers as well. And you'll hear that as part of my interview at 2 p.m. today with Cheryl Smith, Blackburn, who is based up and part of Northland Sports. She's also the Farah Palmer Cup head coach for Northland as well. We have a good chat. You can listen to that at 2 p.m. today. But Waikato Sport Waikato have stepped up and asked all their clubs in Waikato to let them know what volunteers they need. And they're going to have a website up there So if you would like to support your local grassroots clubs, then get in touch with your local sport, maybe that's Sport Waikato, Sport Auckland, or Sport Northland, or wherever. Do get in touch with them. I'm sure they'll point you in the right direction as to where you can volunteer and where you can help out with grassroots rugby. And finally, in golf, it looks like the Memorial will be the first golf tournament to have a fans or crowds at the net when it takes place between the 13th and 19th of July. The PGA Tour will be returning with a Charles Webb Challenge, the RBC Heritage, the Travelers Championship, and the Rocket Mortgage Classic. Before then, all those four, they've already said, will be behind closed doors. The John Deere Classic was the first one that could have had the crowds, but that one has now been cancelled. So it looks like the Memorial will be the first one on the PGA Tour to have fans returning. But it's good to see golf is also returning as well. You're now up to date with all the important sports news, starting your day the best way here with the morning sports briefing. Thank you very much for joining us, and don't forget to join us again tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. here on Facebook. Do like the page and share the video. Do spread the word about our channel. That'll be much appreciated.